How was jam today?
His rugby friends there?
The
Because
roll is being shined and filled with coal.
yeah.
So we think that relationships should be easy. We think it shouldn't be a problem to have relationships, and yet they are. And Freddie Mercury knew it, you know it, I know it. Relationships are challenging. They're a struggle, they're frustrating, they're confusing, and not so easy to always pull off. And so that's why we're jumping into the series, and we're talking about how do we move forward, how do we do well in our relationships. And so let me tell you what we're going to be doing over the next 6 weeks. We're looking at what God says about how to do relationships and how to do them well. And we're also plugging into content by a man by the name of Dr. John Van Epp. And John Van Epp actually he's studied the Bible, he's looked at what God says about relationships, and he's kind of packaged it together in a way that I think is brilliant and incredibly understandable, makes it so accessible so that all of us can be good at our relationships. John's actually the president, the founder of an organization called Love Thinks, and because of his work and expertise in the area, he's shown up in a number of different places. Maybe you've seen him in the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Psychology Today, O Magazine, Cosmopolitan. Maybe you've seen him on the CBS Early Show, Good Morning America, Fox News, or Focus on the Family. And over the last 6 or 7 months, John has become a friend of ours here at LCBC, so much so with his content that I look at it and I go, what I love about it is it's not complicated, it's very intuitive, it's very understandable. I figure if I can understand it, then the rest of us can understand it as well. And even our kids can understand it. And so that's why this weekend we're beginning to teach this content to kids and our kid men, students all across the church. And it's proven with years of experience in working with this material. And again, it just comes straight out of the Bible. And so excited about where we're headed over the next several weeks because I think it can be life-changing for each and every one of us. Now, before we jump into John's content, I need to tell you what winning at relationships is not. I want to make sure there's no confusion. And so when we talk about winning at relationships, it doesn't mean, oh, this is going to be great because now I'm going to win every argument that I get into. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that all of a sudden you're going to get your way all the time. You're going to win. You're going to get your way all the time. We're not saying that all of a sudden you're going to get everything that you want. It's always going to go your way. This isn't a series about how to get your way. Instead, it's about developing the skills so that when you find yourself in relationships with other people, you can experience joy, you can experience peace. They can be rich, they can be satisfying relationships and experiences in your life, even in the midst of challenges, even in the midst of struggles, because challenges will come and struggles will come. And it means just being ready to experience a healthy relationship. And so let me ask you to grab a Bible from the seats there around you, and there should be Bibles in the seats around all of you in all of our locations. Even if you don't typically open up a Bible, I'll tell you what to open it to. It's page 900, Philippians chapter 2, and love for you to read and follow along as we see what God actually has to say about our relationships and specifically maybe the attitude, maybe the mindset that we ought to go into each and every relationship. So what I want to show you from Philippians chapter 2 is the posture that God says you and I need to take if we're going to win at our relationships. Philippians chapter 2, let me begin reading in verse 3, page 900, Philippians chapter 2. It says, don't be selfish, don't try to impress others, be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. Now let me just stop. And let's think about what we just read. It says, don't be selfish, don't try to impress others, be humble, thinking others as better than yourself. And we go, wait a minute, this doesn't sound like I'm winning at this relationship. This sounds like it's all about others, it's not about me. And the verse goes on, it says, don't look out only for your own interest, but take interest in others too. Wait a minute. I'm not getting my way here. I'm not going to come out on top here. Doesn't sound like winning. And you're right. And it's hard to kind of put this kind of attitude into action, but it's the action it's the attitude necessary if we're actually going to win at our relationships. And it is hard, but here's the good news. Here's what God says. Go down to verse 13, because here's what God says about this. He says, "For God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases Him." God is working in you to give you the desire and the power to do this, to be able to have the attitude that will help you win at your relationships. Now, here's what you need to know. Each and every one of us, across all of our locations, every single seat, God is saying to you, no matter what your past has been, no matter what your relationships have been, no matter how broken you've been, no matter how much you may have broken other people, regardless of what your situation has been, God is saying to you right now today, He says, look, I'm telling you, if you want, I will give you the power, I will give you the desire to win at your relationships, each and every one of us. And you need to understand, God is saying there's the ability. There's the ability and the opportunity here to change your relationships. So I'm inviting you to take up God's offer, to give us the desire, to give you the desire, to give you the power to begin to win at your relationships. And so I'm going to pause for a moment and just talk to God and pray. And I would invite you to pray as well. And praying is just talking to God. And I'm going to talk to God as I talk to Him. You talk to Him in your head and your heart. And let's just say, God, we're here and we're ready. Because we know relationships are hard. And we know we haven't always done well in our relationships. And we know that we want to win. So God, we're here. And we want that desire. We want that power to do our relationships well. So pray with me for a moment. Heavenly Father, first, I just want to say thank you for caring about us. Thank you for being aware of the fact that relationships are hard. Thank you for creating us as relational beings. But God, thank you more for giving us the ability, the power, the desire to do life and to do relationships your way. Doesn't come natural to put other people's interests first. Doesn't come natural to not need to win in every situation. Doesn't come natural to put other people's interests before ours. So God, we're asking today that you would give us that desire, that you'd give us the power to live life your way. And Father, as we do, may our relationships even today begin to change. May they be different because of your power in us. And I pray in Jesus' name, amen. Well, if you haven't yet done it, let me ask you to grab an outline from the program that you should have received as you came in, because you're going to want to take some notes. And let's jump in. And I want to introduce you to this model that John Van Epp has created. And for some of you, it might be reviewed, but this model, again, is based on the belief that there are 5 bonds, 5 connections in every relationship. And when I say every relationship and the fact that every relationship can win when you begin to understand this model, I really mean every single relationship. It could be a relationship between a mom and a son. It could be a relationship between a daughter and her dad. It could be a relationship between a husband and a wife. It could be a relationship between roommates. It could be relationships between coworkers or classmates or any relationship you think of. This model works and can work. And bottom line, there are 5 bonds, 5 connection points. And these are the 5. Know, trust, rely, commit, and touch. 5 connection points or bonds in each and every relationship. All of these 5 are active in all of our relationships. And the more we understand these bonds, the more we have opportunity to win at our relationships. These lines and these squares or rectangles are actually sliders. And when I say sliders, I just mean that they are ways that we can control each of these different bonds in our relationships. So sliders like when I was 16, I bought my first car. I bought a 1967 GTO, and I thought it was the greatest car in the world. And when I bought that car, the one thing that it did not have, very first thing that I put into it was what I thought was a great stereo system. And it was an 8-track player, and I thought that was amazing. Could have bought a cassette player, but cassettes aren't going to make it. 8-track is the wave of the future. And so I bought my 8-track player, and they were great until they would eat your 8-track tapes. But on that stereo in my car, there were sliders. I'll just call them sliders. And one slider maybe would control the bass. And I liked the bass, but I didn't want it too loud where it distorted things. So I would turn the bass up. Another controlled the treble and didn't really like treble, but I liked it to be crisp and clear, so I keep it up here. Another slider probably controlled the balance as far as what speakers were playing louder in the car. And you always wanted it centered right in the center of the car. And yet I didn't sit in the center of the car. I sat out to the side, so I had to kind of pull it up a little bit so that where I sat, I could hear the music the way I wanted. wanted it. That is until several years later when Ruth and I started dating. And when Ruth and I started dating, so bucket seats in the GTO, hard metal console, but Ruth would sit on that console so she could sit right next to me. And so because she was making that sacrifice, and it was a sacrifice to do that, then I wanted it to sound good for her. So right in the middle of the car, I would set that. And these were levels or levers that would allow me to control the way the stereo sounded. Now, when it comes to relationships, you need to understand there are levers, there are sliders, there are controls where we can impact every relationship that we're involved in. And what you need to understand as we go through this series is you and I have control over what happens in our relationships. They don't have to be out of control. We don't have to be used. We don't have to be damaged. We don't have to always be hurt in our relationships. You and I have more control than we think. And remember, God says, I will give you the power. I will give you the desire to do life His way and begin to understand how we can win at our relationships. And we just sang about a few moments ago that God is this way maker. We said, God, you're this miracle worker. You can turn lives around. You can mend broken hearts. That has to do with relationships as well. He can step into your relationships and He can mend your broken heart. He's the one that He says, I'll show you the way. And I'll give you the ability to do this. Now, let me describe each of the bonds to you real quickly. The idea of know. When you know in a relationship, what you know are just factual information about the other person. It's where you understand facts. And so you meet somebody, you don't know a whole lot about them, but you begin to talk to them, you get information about them, maybe you observe them in other settings, and you begin to know more and more factual information. The more facts you have about that person, the more this level goes up. And so you want to get to know as many facts about the person as possible. And so you begin to gain knowledge. You do that by talking. You do that by having experiences with the person, by watching the person in different environments. That's knowing. Factual information about the other person. Trust is different than know. Trust is what you actually believe or feel about the other person. It's how much confidence you have in them based on what you think about them, not based on facts. So here's what's interesting. You may meet somebody, not know a whole lot about them, may not have a lot of facts about them, but you assign, when you meet them, a level of trust. And you go, you know what, I don't know, but I think this person is very trustworthy, and so I'm going to assign them a high level of trust, and I think they're going to come through. I think they're a good person. I think they're solid. I don't think they're going to hurt me, and so you assign them a high level of trust. Now, what's interesting is this is why sometimes you'll develop a relationship with somebody, and it's a quick relationship. You don't know them well, and all of your friends or all of your family are going, what are you doing? You don't know them. You can't trust them that much. You don't have the facts. You only have limited information about them. Why are you trusting them so high? And some of us trust people very quickly, and we just kind of open up our hearts and our lives to them. I tend to be more of a skeptic, and so for me, I'm slow at giving trust. And people have to kind of earn it from me and work their way up on the dial. But that's what trust is. It's just belief or what you think about the other person. Rely, the idea of reliance is just how much you depend on the other person to meet your needs, their needs. Do you rely on them to meet your needs? And maybe you have needs when it comes to just relationships. Maybe you just need companionship. You're saying, I'm so lonely. I'm tired of being alone. And it's natural to be that way. God designed us to be in relationships, and I'm just lonely. I'm tired of being alone. They're there. I can have meals with them. We can go to movies together. I'm just happy to have a companion. And so you begin to rely on them. Or maybe your reliance is one of status where you go, you know what, nobody notices me at all. But when I'm with them, everybody notices them, and so people notice me, and so you're relying on them for status in your life. Or maybe it's financial, just comfort and just care, and they care for me financially, and so you develop reliance on them. You begin to rely on them to meet certain needs in your life. Or conversely, maybe they're relying on you. And they're heavily relying on you. This is when it gets out of whack, is when they're relying on you too heavy, and you go, I'm not the Savior. I can't do all of this for them. And they become very dependent on you, or maybe you become very dependent on them, and that's what reliance is. The idea of commit really comes down to the status of the relationship, the degree of loyalty, obligation, responsibility of the other person. How committed are you to the other person? When you first meet, you're just acquaintances, you become friends, maybe saying this person's my best friend, maybe in a dating relationship, you become engaged, maybe married, or you're working together, and the commitment level goes up. Now, what's tricky with this one is you may be highly committed to the other person, but they're not committed to you. And you'd say, you know what, I'd go through fire with that person, and they're going, you know what, I like you a lot, but if fire comes, I'm out of here. And that's why sometimes you go through a hard experience in your life, and then they're not there for you anymore. And you go, what happened to all my friends? Well, they had a different level of commitment than you. Last area is that of touch. This one's a little bit more obvious, indicates how much touch we experience in the relationship. When we first meet, maybe it's a handshake, you get to know each other more, it's a hug, and just a touch of the shoulder, and there's touch. Can be sexual. Don't think it always has to be sexual. Don't assume that. It's just touch in a relationship, and all of us want touch in our lives, and so touch is also another factor in our relationships. Those are the 5 bonds, and again, you and I control them with these levers. So over the next several weeks, we're going to talk about how do we move the levels, how do we set these sliders so that we can experience it differently. But just to kind of give you an example of how this works in our lives, let me call somebody up with me. Dave Sastrom, I've invited to come, and Dave is a part of our staff here at LCBC. His wife is on staff, Lori. She works with KidMin at our Mannheim location. And Dave is going to come, and I just want to have Dave describe his life, his experience with Lori. Thanks for being here, Dave. Describe his experience with Lori using this so you can understand how this model works. And the reason why I want you to understand this, what Dave is going to do, you can do. You can use this model, and you can look at every relationship in your life, and you can say, okay, this is kind of where I am. This is how my life has happened. So, Dave, let's talk a little bit about your life. So, your role here specifically is what?
Yeah, so I've been serving 6 years, but my role changed a little bit over the years, and so I now serve 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s here in LCBC Mannheim in group environments for singles or couples. So that's primarily what I focus on.
Cool, good. So, Dave, let's use this to kind of describe your relationship, and specifically with Lori.
Yep.
And so, you've known Lori for how long? When did you first meet her, and what were the levels when you first met Lori?
Yeah, we met 2005. We were in a ministry based in Michigan, so we met in Buchanan, Michigan. She's a Carolina girl. I'm from the suburbs of Chicago. We meet there, so we didn't know each other really at all. I was a leader in that ministry or on one of the teams, so she's getting to know me. I think the trust was higher for me just inherently because I was a leader and she joined the team.
So she trusted you. She didn't know a lot of facts, but
Right.
just assigned you a high level
You're
of
the
trust
leader,
because
I'm
of
going to trust
that.
at least
Okay,
that, yeah,
good.
based on what you're... And then commitment. We were committed to a common goal together. It wasn't to each other so much as what we had to be about. And then, a team relying on one another to just do what we do in friendship. Now, I was crazy attracted to her when I first met her, and I still am. But I tried to leave by the wayside. I got to focus on being a leader, and so, yeah,
Cool.
this was it probably.
Okay,
for
good.
us.
So then at some point you started dating.
Yep.
And so how did the levels change when you decided, okay, let's start dating?
Yeah. So we start dating, and it was 2004. Then 2005, we start dating. And the hard part was we dated long distance before iPhone. Video chat was still not that
So when you say
prevalent.
long distance, like, what do you mean?
I was at school in Virginia, and she was on the road traveling around the country.
Okay,
And
so not together at all.
Oh, yeah. And so, like, texting, like, you want to talk about it's an endurance race when you have to text, and it takes 3 taps just to get W.
So
you
this is
remember
back
that
the old
texting.
phones where you have
Y'all
the
know what I'm
keys
talking
over and
about.
over.
Yeah, so we're, just to text, and it's like, all right, 30 characters is like 400 taps of the thumb, so you're just like, we'll text as little as possible. But we would talk on the phone, so we got to know each other, but long distance, you can only know so much through phone calls. I think we started the trust built in the relationship, and so that, built up and moved around in seasons. I think reliance went up and down just based on emotional reliance, especially. We're in a dating relationship, we're getting to know each other, and now processing new things over the phone together or what we're struggling through.
So interesting how this one can change as a relationship is new, because
yeah.
obviously you go, okay, I can talk to this person, I can talk to her, she can talk to you, and you develop this bond, but reliance goes up because that's your kind of mate.
Yeah, and we wanted our relationship to honor God. We wanted it to be about being about each other and not just about, because sex is the easy part, touch is the easy part. So we left that, we tried to keep that there in our relationship in order to honor God and do things
And
the
long
right way.
distance, that made that.
And God knew I needed it to be long distance for that
Made
to
it
stay
easier.
over there, apparently.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So at some point you decide, okay, let's get married.
Yeah.
And so you were married. And so describe kind of how things changed once you were married.
Yeah, so married 12 years. Let's just go over here. I mean, we got married, okay? So that went up. We waited. And so we enjoy that. And so, but then here's what's fascinating is in our relationship, and I think in any marriage relationship or dating, you get you think you know each other, and then we had to really date because we were long distance. We had to date even in marriage, like in a new way. And so started to go down and then come back up.
So you knew each other as a dating couple. You didn't know each other as husband and wife. You hadn't
Right.
actually lived together. And
Right.
so you thought you'd kind of maxed out, but you
Yeah.
realized, there's so much more I need to learn.
Now we're living together and we're like, oh, that's where he throws his socks. Oh, that's how we treat the kitchen, all of that stuff. So the no goes down and starts to build back up. I think the trust, because that changed, you start to go, wait, you're like that? And then you start to build trust in a new way. Reliance, in marriage, we relied on one another. Lori, especially, we experienced a shift where she really built a lot of trust into me and in God as we moved 3 years after we were where we were and married. We moved to here in PA. And so she relied heavily on me and on God, but built a lot of trust in God and in me to make that big jump, even though it was kind of, wow, this is surprising. So, and our commitment, we were married. I think it's always been up there for us. That's been a no-brainer. So it shifts in seasons and
So it's
stress.
not like, Dave, it's not like you're saying, okay, we achieved the top of, and it's stayed there all the time. It's
Right.
constantly fluctuating. These are your dials, so I shouldn't reset your dials. But it's changing. It's moving all the time.
All the time. And then as I got to know myself more and what God was doing in my life and going back into my past and healing and growing and moving into the future, my no went down, so she started to learn more about me, and then we're learning. And the same for her as she learned about herself. So these would constantly change. And then in seasons of stress or work, one of the big ones for us is when Lori went from part-time to full-time work. We were at a point where she was doing a lot of the housework at home, being part-time, and went full-time, and we were like, wait, why are we experiencing so much stress at home? Oh, part of it is the unfairness of why would we leave it imbalanced? So the rely went up in a new way of like, hey, I need you. We need to share this because we're both sharing equal amounts of
But
work.
the reason you were able to go up on this is because you learned some things about each other and
Exactly.
said, this is imbalanced, we need to do some work.
And then build a new no. And honestly, the trust starts to move up and so on based on some of these. And in those seasons of stress too, this changed, That would change because it's like we just need to, that doesn't need to be about sexual touch. It needs to be, are you here just for me and not just for you? Because every guy knows it can be just for you.
So Dave, now you have two kids.
boys. Yeah, we
so
have 2 boys, 10 and 8.
how would you set these levels differently with 2 boys?
So our first son, I remember when he was born, it was amazing. I cried and laughed at the same time when he was born, just because of that amazing experience. But the first one I'll adjust is you have a kid and you just do this. So you have to do that. Because the reality is, guy, yeah, I want that, but the reality is she just gave birth to a child. Like, I've got to leave her alone like that if I have any respect and care for her. But no changes because now we are knowing ourselves in new ways. She's learning about herself as mom. She's never been mom. And I've never been dad. And so that shifted. It goes down and starts to move in a different way of learning about ourselves. Our rely went up a lot because now it's middle of the night, who's caring for, like, I need more rest, I'm relying on you. Our commitments never changed there. It was always way up there to one another and now to our kids. And then the trust built because we saw, like, I'm seeing you as a mom in a way I've never seen, and I love it. I'm learning that about you, and the trust was going up to follow it, and rely had to be up, and they just all started to adjust based on the season we were in.
So let me tell you why I love this model so much. What Dave has done is he's just kind of described a history of his relationship with Lori, and it's visual. You can look at it and you can see. And when you begin to see, okay, this level is lower than it ought to be, it helps you to find, where do we need to work at this? Or when things happen over here and touch us way here, why is that? Is there a reason why it's so low, and what do we need to do to fix that? And you could do the exact same thing. I could call any one of you up here, and you could come and I could ask you questions, and you could look at your life, and you could move these sliders around and say, here's where it was 5 years ago, here's where it was a year ago, here's where it is today. You can even say, here's where I'd like it to be next year. So what do I need to do to get it to that level next year? Any one of us can do it. It's a mirror. It's a way to look at ourselves. But more than a mirror, it's also a conversation starter, because you can sit down with your person. It could be your boss. It could be anybody in your life and say, okay, here's where it is for me right now. And what do we need to do to change it? What do we need to do to improve it? And so you sit down, you talk. It provides conversations and a plan to kind of move forward. Any one of us can do it. And you can do it as well, and so I love this model. Dave, thanks for sharing kind of your story in this process. So as you look at this model, a couple things that you need to know as you begin to look at your life, just the way we did with Dave's, a couple things you need to understand. You don't ever achieve a state of perfection where you go, okay, we've got it all figured out. All the dials are where they need to be. Because there are a couple of rules or laws that go with this model that you need to understand. And they're true about your life. They're true about my life. The law that I want us to look at today is really the law of slow leaks. And what the law of slow leaks says is it's natural, totally natural, for each of these to slide down. There's going to be a leak. And it's just gradually going to slow, gradually going to leak and drop in its levels. And it's not that you're doing anything wrong. Nothing major happened that caused these to leak. They just leak. It's just the way it works. It's like your tires on your car, wintertime. They just leak air. Nothing happened. It just happens naturally. So as you experience slow leaks, the danger is if you don't do something about them, they can flatten out your relationship. Or if you don't do anything about them, they can totally blow out your relationship. And some of you are experiencing flatness right now in your relationships, and you're going, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what happened. You might even say, nothing really happened. We just kind of grew apart. We don't feel close anymore. And maybe you're thinking that of your spouse. You're going, I don't know him anymore. I don't know her anymore. We just don't have anything in common anymore. And what's happened is you've allowed slow leaks to happen in your relationship. Because when you started, you didn't get married, you didn't develop the relationship thinking it's going to be lousy. There was something there that connected you, but things just gradually leaked, and that's just normal. It just happens in all of our relationships. And so along with the law of slow leaks is the law of just realignment. And saying we've got to constantly rebalance, put new air into it, move the sliders. And so you look and you go, you know what? This is lower than it ought to be, and so I need to begin to put energy into knowing. Or I need to begin to put energy into relying, whatever it may be for you, and you look and you begin to realign, and you've got to do it frequently. You've got to take time and just realign and say, look, here's what I need to do in order to move forward in my relationship. And so you begin to look and you begin to adjust and you begin to make changes to the relationship. Here's what you need to understand about our relationships, is that there is a shelf life to the good that you put into relationships. There's a shelf life. In other words, you can put a lot of work into knowing the other person, but there's a shelf life there because what's going to happen, it's going to leak. And you can do good things in your relationship, but just because you did good things yesterday doesn't mean it's going to pay off today. You can do good things in your relationship a year ago, but because of the law of slow leaks, it's gradually going to go down. And so don't just assume, well, we were great a year ago. I don't need to do any more work. We're good today, because it doesn't work that way. It's constant work. It takes work to win at relationships, but this model helps show you where you need to work. Now, what I love about the model is this. You can easily figure out where you need to put your energy because you always start on the left. You always go to the level of no, because the level of no drives everything else. And our tendency, because knowing and relying and trusting and committing are harder, what happens so often, the easiest one is touch. And so we jump into touch real quickly without knowing or trusting or committing or relying, and we go directly to touch because that one's an easy one. At least it appears. And so we get it out of balance, and we jump into touch way before we ought to. And so you always start on the left, and if there are issues in a relationship between you and your daughter, you know, you look and you go, okay, when I first had our daughter, you say, she thought I ran the world. She thought I was king. She thought I was wonderful. And you would play together, and she loved being held by you, and she loved being hugged by you, and she'd sit on your lap, and you were just wonderful. You could do no wrong. And then she turned 13. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, I don't know her anymore. And she doesn't want me to come anywhere near her and touch. She doesn't want to hug. And you go, I don't know what happened. And so in any relationship, whether it's with your 13-year-old daughter, whether it's with your husband, your wife, whether it's a coworker, a friend, you always start on the knowledge side. It's okay, I need to figure out what's going on in her life. I need to get to know her again. I need to know her as a 13-year-old, not a 5-year-old. And you begin to work on the knowledge side. So if you're going to work on the knowledge side of the relationship, then there's actually a formula to kind of help with that. And the formula is simple. It really involves 3 T's. And 3 T's, simple. And so I want to give you those 3 T's today so that you can this week begin to work on the knowledge area, because again, all relationships, it starts on the left. And you work on that knowledge side. 3 T's are really pretty simple. When I tell you what they are, you're going, that's so common sense. You're right. It's very intuitive. We just don't always do it. First T is this: undistracted time talking. Just communicating with one another. It involves talking and communicating. It means we have to actually talk and verbally talk with one another. It needs to be frequent. It needs to be consistent, long enough to actually go deeper. Because here's the thing. When communication dies, the relationship dies as well. And you know that's true. You've got friends that you were so close before and you thought you were wonderful in your relationship. You grew apart, and what happened? You stopped talking. You don't know them today. You knew them a year ago, but they've changed. And you stopped talking. You know that. You and your husband, you have been so close, and all of a sudden, you don't know what happened. Nothing bad happened. You just don't know him anymore. You don't know her anymore. You stopped talking. Or with your kids, you go, you know what? I don't understand them. I don't understand him. You don't know him anymore. And so you begin to talk, and you look for undistracted time just to talk and communicate with one another. And can I just tell you, it also is true in our relationship with God. And maybe right now you're saying, I feel so distant from God. I feel so disconnected. I'm not even sure he's there. Can I tell you what probably happened? You stopped getting to know him. At some point, you stopped talking to him. At some point, you stopped listening to him. It happens in our relationship with God as well. And we talk to him by just talking to him. We listen to him just by opening up the Bible. And at some point, you stop talking and things change, and now you're struggling. It's the same thing. Talk. It's communication, because when the communication dies, the relationship dies as well. So relationship is key, and it takes time to do that. There's actually a field study that was done, and it was written about in Pediatrics Journal. They looked at families that were eating together at fast food restaurants, and they looked at 55 families, and what they were trying to figure out is what is the interaction around the table while families specifically are eating together at these fast food restaurants. And what they began to realize is there wasn't as much interaction going on as they expected, because people were so absorbed by their electronic devices. And what they found in their 55 families is 40 out of the 55, the dominant thing was focus on those electronic devices. 40 out of 50, they're not talking at all. But here's the interesting thing. It wasn't the kids that were worse at it. It was the parents. The parents were so absorbed in their devices that they weren't even talking. They said they were so entranced on their phones that they often would scold and berate their kids when their kids tried to talk to them. And you go, I don't understand what's happening to our family. I don't know why we are struggling in the relationship. Well, it's because you don't know each other anymore. You stopped talking. So put down the phone. Put away the iPad, put away your computer, turn off the TV, put down the laptop, whatever you need to do, because you need undistracted time together. And second T is one of just togetherness. You've got to be together. There's something about the bond of actually physically being together that makes a difference. And this is why long-distance relationships are so difficult, because you don't really know each other. The way you get to know each other is you're together in different experiences, diverse experiences, and you see them act different ways, and you get to know them by spending time together. Ruth and I actually just spent 4 days at the shore. We went to Ocean City, New Jersey over New Year's. She drove all the way there, all the way back, but I guided her and gave her direction as she was driving. But when we went, we knew it was going to be different because everything was shut off where we were staying. There was no TV, no cable, no internet. I was a little scared going in. I thought I'm going to miss all the football games, and that turned out to be a huge blessing in disguise. I didn't have to watch games. But our 4 days turned out to be amazing. I mean, because we talked and we walked and we ate and we slept and we talked and we just got to know each other more, because you constantly have to work at this because it leaks. And so we got to know each other even more. And so getting to know somebody requires talking. It means diverse settings. The last T, first one is just time. Third is togetherness. And then experiences with enough time that you actually begin to get to know the person. And so researchers have come up with what they call the 90-day rule. And the 90-day rule, the way they came up with this is they were conducting studies. They were watching people over a 20-year period of time. And what they found, they were looking at dating couples specifically. What they found is that over a 90-day period, relationships changed dramatically, because somewhere during that 90-day period, there would be some interaction, something would happen with one of the persons that caused a gasp moment. They said a gasp moment, kind of a, I can't believe she acted that. I can't believe he said that. I can't believe he responded that way to me. And what they came away with saying is, don't rush into anything. Give at least 90 days because you need to watch and look for those gasp moments. And as you see those gasp moments, is it a one-time thing? Is this just the way they always are? Was this kind of a one-time situation? Or is this a pattern that is going to actually carry out in the relationship? And so what they found is that at least half of the couples during this 90-day period said, you know what, we don't want to stay together because they got to know each other. And the tendency, again, is to jump into a relationship to not know each other well, maybe to assign a high level of trust to that person. You don't know them. Maybe some reliance, no commitment whatsoever, but let's jump into touch right away. And then you struggle, and then you're hurt, and you're broken. You go, I don't get it. I don't know what happened. Well, this is what happened. You didn't know the person. So you always start at the left. And you start with no, and you say, okay, what do I need? What do I know about this person? And yeah, I know about them at work, but do I know what they're like at home? I know about them at the gym, but do I know how they treat their family? Do I know how they treat their kids? Do I know how they treat other people? And so you always start and you get to know people. And so biblical as we look at this. There's a man named Paul that was teaching in the Bible, that was teaching a young guy named Timothy how to choose leaders in the church. And Paul's advice was go slow. And this is what he actually said. He said, remember, the sins of some people are obvious, leading them to certain judgment. Some people you look at and you go, oh, they're just bad. Just stay away from them. But he said there are those whose sins will not be revealed until later. There are some people you're not going to see it right away. Wait 90 days, or he's actually saying wait a whole lot longer because you do not know that person. So why are you going to assign trust to them until you get to know them? He's saying don't do that. Go slow. Actually, he also says the inverse to that as well. He says in the same way, the good deeds of some people are obvious. Some people you look at and you go, they're amazing. And you see it and you know it right away. But he said there are some that their good deeds are done in secret. Someday they'll come to light. And his whole point is just go slow. Go slow. You don't need to rush into the relationship. You're only setting yourself up for heartache, for pain, down the road. That's why college roommates. Isn't it fascinating to watch? Together in high school, you're good friends. You go off to college together. We're going to room together. It's going to be wonderful. And halfway into the semester, you hate each other. Why? Well, because you really didn't know each other. You knew each other in high school, but you didn't ever live together. You didn't have to share a bathroom together. You didn't see the way clothes are left on the floor or not on the floor. You didn't see any of that because you didn't know each other. It just takes time to develop that relationship. Now, some of you are in a relationship right now, and you wish you could get out of it. And you find yourself thinking, you know what? I jumped too quickly, didn't know them, and you think, how different would your life be had you just given it time, had you not rushed in to the situation? And any relationship needs to always start at the left. And so as you're evaluating, as you look at this tool, and you've got the tool on your programs, if you get involved in groups, and I hope you will over the next several weeks, then you'll actually be given one of these models, and you can look at it. As you're looking at your relationship, you always start on the left. And you start with getting to know. The way you get to know is you just spend time talking, undistracted time together, and as you spend time together, then you just give time talking, being together, and it begins to change your relationships. Don't fall for in your relationships. Don't fall for the Facebook version of somebody. Don't think that because of what they say on Facebook is who they are. You know that's not true. You're getting a representation of who they are, but you're not getting that person exactly. And the tragedy is this. The people that you love most, I love the way somebody said it. He said, you know least those whom you love the most. The people that you love the most oftentimes are the people you spend the least amount of time getting to know. Or you knew them well at one point, but it's just leaked. You never took time to realign, and so you really don't know them well. And you go, I love them, but I don't know them anymore. And so put the 3 T's into action. Be intentional about spending time together. And make sure that you're spending time where you're talking to each other, you're being involved in diverse experiences, and just go slow. You and I don't have to fail at relationships. We don't. You don't have to have your heart broken again and again and again, but it takes work. More than just work, though. You might be working real hard. You may be working on the wrong things. And so use this model to help you understand what you need to work on. Work on the knowledge piece. Get to know the person before you allow yourself to get pulled in any deeper. And that's what I love about the model. It just shows you, here's where I need to work. And so this week, my challenge to you is put it to work. And put the 3 T's to work. And ask God, say, God, show me the way. Be the way maker in this relationship. And God, mend my broken heart. And God, do whatever you need to do. Give me the desire, the power to change this relationship because I want to do life your way. And so I'm going to pray for us and ask God to be with us this week. If after we finish the gathering, you'd want somebody else to pray with you, in all of our auditoriums up to the left-hand corner, there are people that would love to pray with you. Or if you want to get involved in a group, do that. Ask God in next steps. But let me lead us in prayer. Heavenly Father, you tell us how to do life, and you tell us how to do it well. You even offer to give us the power and the desire to do it right. May we receive your power. May we receive your desire. And may we just practice the 3 T's this week. May we work on knowledge so that our relationships can be different. Thanks, God, for loving us, and we love you. I pray in Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for being here. Why do this? Because all of us want somebody to love. See you next week.